Now in this video, we're going to be talking about Cemher Microne, Australia's highest performing microcement system. Now the reason why Microne is so high performing is a few characteristics. Now number one, it is ultra flexible, it is extremely durable, and it is waterproof in every layer of the system. This means all the way from the base coat all the way up to the top coat, we're not relying on sealers alone for waterproofing. Now, before we get into the system and talk about the steps, we do recommend looking back at the substrate and product guides because it's going to give you an exact detail of different substrates and how we would prepare them ready for the micro cement system. Now, before we start the primer and mesh, you want to make sure that we have our primer 100. We have a suitable roller to the size of the project that we're working on, and then we're going to have our fiberglass mesh. Now, with the fiberglass mesh, we recommend pre-cutting the strips to the size that you need and make sure that the micro cement mesh curls in towards the wall. Now we use an 80G mesh. We don't use anything higher like 160, what you would traditionally use for render, because the micro cement system is only 3 to 4 mil thick over the entire application. So the thin micro mesh is the best mesh to use. Now we want to apply a generous amount of primer, make sure that we coat the entire area that we're working on. Then we're going to get our mesh and we make sure that it's curling towards the substrate we're working on, whether it's the wall or floor. Now we're just going to rest it there. We're going to get our primer and we're simply going to tack it down so it sticks nice and flat to the substrate. Now, as we apply our mesh, we want to make sure that when we're adding our next piece, that we're just going to go nice and close. Now, we recommend not trying to overlap too much, as you may need to counter by adding thicker coats if there is an overlap. Now, if you just simply apply it up nice and close, they're going to sit perfectly flat and flush all the way through. So now that we've completed our primer 100 and our mesh, we're going to leave that to dry for at least an hour. Now, keep in mind that the primer 100 does have a residual tack, so it'll remain tacky for up to 12 hours, but if you've left it that 1 hour to cure, it is ready to overcoat. So now that we've completed our primer and mesh, we're going to move on to the first base coat. Now you'll notice that Microne is a ready mixed product. It is ready to use straight from the bucket. Now, if you wanted to get the coating a little bit more buttery to apply, you can add up to 5% water to the total mix. That would be 10 kilo bucket of product, 500 milliliters of clean water, and then stir and apply. Now, the only time we'll add any additional hardener or additive would be if we're using the Microne Plus system. Now, this is traditionally used in commercial settings or very high traffic areas or even external floors. Now, that would be a 500 ml Microne Plus additive into the mix of every layer of the system. Now, because we're only using the Microne standard system in this video, we're going to open the bucket and we're going to apply directly to the surface. So all we're going to do is grab some product out of the bucket on our scraper. I'm going to simply put it on the top third of the trowel. Now, all we're trying to do on the first coat is to simply just cover the grid lines in the mesh. So now that we've coated the entire substrate that we're working on, we're just gonna have a quick look over and see if there's any high points, any big drag lines or anything that we can fix while we're here. So with a clean trowel, we're just simply gonna bring it over and just take any high points out. Now it's important that we're sanding in between each and every coat. It is better to have a flat, smooth surface ready to start the next coat, especially being the system only 3 to 4 mil thick overall. Now, 2 discs that we recommend is the Merkur Galaxy and the Merkur Abranet Ace. Now, with our base coats, we want to make sure that we're using either a 40 or an 80 grit, and our top coats either 80 or 120. Now the coatings are very durable and they do wear through your sanding discs quickly, so we do recommend using a quality disc. Another thing to watch out for is discs that have a colored oxide to them. So the yellow Bosch discs from Bunnings or the Diablo discs that are red, they do leave a color transfer into the micro cement that is only visible once it's sealed at the end. So we do recommend using a non-color transfer disc like the Merkur discs. So now that we've finished sanding our first coat of base, we're going to move on to applying the second coat of base. Now we're going to apply it exactly the same way we did the first coat, spreading it to the height of the grain, which is only 1 millimeter thick. Now it is a pre-mix ready to use product, but if you want to get a little bit more buttery and a bit more simple to work with, you can add 5% water into the entire 10 kilo bucket. So that 10 kilo bucket, 5% water would be a 500 ml water additive. Give it a quick buzz up or a stir, and then it'll be a little bit easier to apply. So now that we've applied both coats of base and sanded our final coat of base, we're ready to move on to the medium, which is our top coat. Now, this is also a ready to use product straight out of the bucket. Again, we can add that 5% clean water if we decide to do so, but this time we are going to add tint to the bucket. So what we're going to do is we're going to pull a little bit of the product back, we're going to add the tint in, we're going to stir it up for 2 to 3 minutes, and then we're ready to apply. Now, because there's no hardening additive to this standard Micro 1 system, the bucket will remain fresh to use for up to 12 months. So once you've finished your first coat, simply lid the bucket, put it aside, and we can come back to it and start coating again whenever we choose to do so. So now with this first coat of Micro 1, we're not going to aim to get any detailing or texture in the coating. We're simply going to apply it on nice and tight, which is 0.5 to 0.6 mil thick, which is the height of the grain. The texture and the detailing will come in the final coat where we can add that so it's visual. Now when we apply the coating, we're simply going to drop it on and we're going to lower our trowel and close it over. Now moving on to our final coat of Micro 1 medium, this is where we're going to add in any details or any sort of visual effect that we want the final micro cement to look like. Now we're going to get our scraper, we're going to grab our trowel, and we're also going to get a spray mist bottle on the side as well. Now when we're doing our texture coating, we're going to do our minimal pitting by stamping and some different effects that we're going to go through, and then we're going to give it a really light spray and close it over, and that's going to give a really natural pitted appearance at the end. Okay, so now that we've completed our final top coat, we've done our stamping, a little bit of spraying, closing over to get that really nice natural texture. Now you can see a lot of natural variation in the Micro 1 product. This is the same color straight out of the bucket. There's no need for blending or adding other colors into it. Now, one thing we do recommend watching out for is as the product starts to dry, we're not going to press too hard as we'll get a burnishing effect. Now, burnishing can look quite nice in charcoal and darker colors if you are going for that effect. But if you press on it too hard, the product will start to darken. Okay, so keep that in mind. Another thing to think of is when we have any high points or tails like we did take out in the first coats of the base, we are going to leave them this time. So we're going to leave them to be corrected by the final sanding. Okay, so we've finished our final coat, we've done our final sand, we're going to move on to sealing. Now, the high performance sealer that we use is AP70. It has a 65% solids content. It is the best sealer on the market. Now, remember that Micro 1 is waterproof all the way through, so this is for our stain resistance alone. Now, the ratio here is 1 litre of part A to 400 mils of part B. We're going to mix them together, give it a 2-minute stir with a stirring stick. We're not going to use any mechanical drills or anything as it's going to put too much air into the sealer. Now, once we've mixed it up, we've got about an hour to work with it, and we're simply going to roll it over the entire coating in random directions, and then we're going to leave it to dry. Now, when we're working with AP70, we want to make sure that we get it on nice and evenly, but also that we're not building up the product. Now, we don't want to flood this sealer on. We want to make sure it is a nice thin application. So we may need to check back over it as we've rolled it and use a semi-dry roller just to take off any of those built up areas. So we're going to make sure that we're always going in random directions to make sure that we don't have any drying and curing lines that are visible in the final sealer. Now, once that one is complete, we're going to leave it to dry for 12 hours, and we're going to move on to the final coat of sealer exactly the same way that we've done the first step. So now that we've left our first coat of sealer to dry for the 12 hours, we're gonna move on to the final step of sealing. Now we're gonna mix it the exact same way as we did before, reapply, and then we're gonna leave it to cure.